The desert held its breath as a cowboy rode beneath a bruised red sky, the last light stretching his shadow long across the cracked earth. He rode without destination, only the slow ache of memories nudging him onward. Faces he couldn't save, mistakes that clawed at him in the quiet hours. Dust clung to his coat like a second skin. The horse beneath him moved with the weary familiarity of a companion who'd learned not to ask why. A single gunshot snapped the silence. Then another. The echoes rolled over the sandstone ridges, sharp enough to lift him straight in the saddle. He pulled the reins, listening. The wind carried smoke, thin, acrid, drifting from the direction of a narrow gulch cut deep into the land. He could turn away, leave the trouble buried in the canyon, and be gone by moonrise. But something in the cadence of the shots, frantic, defensive, gripped him. He nudged his horse forward. The gulch opened like a wound, its rocks scorched and scattered with broken pottery. He dismounted, leading his horse down a path of trampled brush. Voices rose from below, men shouting, snarling, drunk on violence. As he reached the edge of an outcrop, he looked down and saw a storm of chaos. Raiders firing into a small Apache camp where only a few remained standing, pressed against the rocks in desperate resistance. He crouched low, rifle in hand. The moral choice didn't come with thunder or revelation. It arrived as a quiet, heavy certainty settling in his bones. He'd walked away from too much already. Without another thought, he chambered around. The metallic click cut through the dust-filled air like a vow. His first shot caught a raider square in the shoulder. The man dropped his gun and screamed. Confusion rippled through the group as the cowboy moved from cover to cover, firing with methodical precision. The outcropping gave him height. The smoke rising from a burning wagon masked his silhouette just enough. Bullets sparked off stone. A shot grazed his arm, tearing heat across his skin. But he stayed steady. When their leader's gun hand exploded under a well-placed bullet, the remaining raiders panicked. They scrambled onto their horses and vanished into the winding passages of the ravine. Silence settled again, broken only by the crackle of dying flames. The cowboy pressed a hand over his bleeding arm, steadying his breath. He scanned the camp cautiously. For a moment, he wondered if he'd arrived too late, that maybe no one had survived the onslaught. Then he saw her. She stepped from behind collapsed hide shelter, her figure outlined by the orange sway of the fire. She moved with composed intensity, though a knife hand shook from the aftermath of fear. Her eyes were dark and alert, studying him with a mixture of gratitude and threat. The knife rose toward his throat when he approached, but he stopped short and lifted both hands in a slow gesture of peace. "I'm not here to finish what they started," he said quietly. She held his gaze for several tense breaths before lowering the blade. There was no trust in the gesture, only recognition that he wasn't her enemy. The camp was a ruin around them, belongings scattered, the dead lying where they'd fallen. She walked among the wreckage with a tight jaw, grief moving through her like a shadow. When she returned to him, she noticed the blood soaking his sleeve. Without asking, she guided him to a sheltered corner of the gulch where the wind couldn't steal their fire. She tore strips from cloth salvaged from the wreckage and bound his wound with deliberate, practiced movements. He watched the concentration in her eyes, the way she breathed through pain that wasn't physical. Something inside him tightened. He hadn't expected to feel anything tonight except the familiar emptiness. As she worked, she spoke in low, guarded tones. The raiders were searching for something sacred to her people, something that could shift the balance of power in the region. Her presence here had been a duty, not chance. He listened without interruption, sensing how heavily responsibility weighed on her. When she finished bandaging his arm, he asked the only question that mattered. "Will it come back?" Her eyes lifted to the dark mouth of the canyon, where the wind hissed like a warning. "Yes, with more men. They won't leave until they take what they came for." He nodded slowly, absorbing the truth. "Then you can't stay here." "I must reach my people," she said. The words carried resolve, but also the hint of a burden she didn't speak aloud. He understood that burden. It was the same one that lived behind his ribs. He felt an unexpected pull, an urge not just to help, but to see her reach safety. The impulse surprised him with its strength. "I'll take you," he said. She hesitated, studying the sincerity in his voice. Her gaze drifted to his wound, then to the scattered camp, then back to him. A single nod sealed their fragile alliance. The fire between them crackled softly as the stars emerged overhead, scattered like cold silver on black velvet. The night framed them, two strangers tethered by circumstance, both carrying ghosts, both standing at the edge of a storm neither could outrun alone. The desert remained silent, but the future shifted. They rode at first light, slipping through a canyon painted gold by the rising sun. The air was still cool, but the tension between them carried its own heat. The cowboy watched the woman guide her horse with quiet certainty, her posture straight despite the fresh grief she carried. He admired the way she scanned the ridgelines, never letting her vigilance falter. She didn't speak unless necessary, yet every word she offered revealed more of the strength beneath her calm exterior. Tracks in the sand soon confirmed his suspicion. They were being followed. The raiders had regrouped, driven by greed and the wounded pride of men denied their prize. He pointed out the signs to her without slowing their pace, and she absorbed the information with a single determined glance. Fear didn't appear in her expression, only resolve sharpened to a blade's edge. He found himself wanting to protect that resolve, though he knew she neither asked for nor needed protection. She was fighting for her people. He was fighting for the chance to feel useful again. By midday, the two reached the dry bed of a river carved through centuries of erosion. They moved quickly, hooves thudding against packed earth, dust rising in thick plumes behind them. The cowboy caught the echo of horses approaching, several riding hard. A warning shot cracked through the air, splintering the pale trunk of a dead tree inches from her arm. She jerked her reins and glanced at him, and he saw no panic in her eyes, only a fierce spark that urged him onward. The raiders descended from a bluff in a roar of hooves and snarls. He shouted for her to ride to the far bank, and she obeyed without argument, bending low over her horse's neck as bullets tore through the swirling dust. He fired back, each shot carefully chosen despite the chaos. One rider fell, crashing into the riverbed. Another veered off, wounded, but more kept coming. A raider swung a lasso toward her, the rope snapping through the air. She slashed it with her knife, but the action threw her off balance. Her horse reared, and in that moment of vulnerability, a raider lunged forward to seize her arm. The cowboy's heart lurched. He spurred his horse and slammed into the attacker's mount with a force that nearly toppled both riders. The woman wrenched free, barely staying in the saddle. Their eyes met for a heartbeat, gratitude mixed with an unnamed bond neither dared acknowledge aloud. They outran the raiders only when the terrain grew too jagged for a mounted pursuit. Scrub, thorn, and twisted rock formations forced the attackers to slow, giving the pair a narrow window to escape into a weathered overhang carved by wind and rain. A thunderstorm rolled in soon after, sweeping across the desert with sudden rage. Sheets of rain hammered the earth, drumming against the cliffside like restless hands. Inside the shallow shelter, they caught their breath. Lightning illuminated the woman's face in fractured flashes, her sharp features rendered in silver, her eyes reflecting both exhaustion and fierce determination. He watched the rain spill from the canyon like a curtain, thinking that danger had a way of stripping people down to their truest selves. "They won't stop," she said softly, her voice nearly drowned by the storm. "They believe capturing me will give them power over my people." He nodded, his pulse still racing. "And they'll come again. Harder this time." The storm rumbled, echoing the tension between them. "I meant what I said back there," he continued. "I'm not leaving you to face them alone." Her eyes held his for a moment too long. "If you stay by my side," she murmured, "you risk sharing my fate." "Maybe that's a fate I can live with," he answered, surprised by his own honesty. The storm faded by dawn, but the peace it brought was short-lived. They stepped out into a rising mist and directly into a trap. The raiders had circled during the night. Their leader rode forward, his wounded hand wrapped in blood-soaked cloth, fury burning in his gaze. Before the cowboy could draw, a rifle but slammed into the side of his head. The world spun. He hit the ground hard, consciousness slipping. He woke bound at the wrists, surrounded by hostile faces. The woman stood a short distance away, her knife missing, her expression cold with defiance. The leader taunted him, boasting about the leverage he represented, how her tribe would pay dearly to keep their sacred lands free from his control. The cowboy felt rage coil inside him, but he forced himself to stay calm. Anger wouldn't free them. The raiders grew careless, believing victory secured. A broken spur at the cowboy's heel provided the sliver of steel he needed. He twisted his wrists, ignoring the blood, until the rope snapped. The moment he was free, he lunged, disarming the guard and knocking him unconscious with a single desperate blow. The camp erupted in shouts as he mounted the nearest horse and drove it forward, intent on reaching her. She fought with the ferocity of a trapped hawk, managing to shove her captor off balance. The cowboy barreled into the fray, grabbing her arm and hauling her onto the horse behind him. They rode straight into the maze of canyons, the raiders scrambling to follow.